Good evening, everyone. Allow me, first of all, to apologize. I've lost my voice, so I ask for your indulgence. But wanted to welcome you to meeting number 34 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of your screen, and you have a choice of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the extreme flooding in Pakistan. It is now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, the Honourable Minister Sajjan, Minister of International Development. We also have here with the Minister, his officials, Mr. Christopher McClellan, the Deputy Minister, International Development. We have Ms. Tara Carney, Acting Director General, International Humanitarian Assistance. We also have Ms. Cam Doe, Director General, Innovation and Climate Finance Bureau. And lastly, Mr. Christopher Gibbons, Executive Director of the Afghanistan and Pakistan Division. Now, Minister, you will be provided a maximum of 5 minutes for your remarks, after which we will proceed to a round of questions. I will signal to you when you have merely a minute remaining. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for having me here today. And I appreciate all of you highlighting what's going on in Pakistan in terms of the extreme of flooding. Since mid-June of this year, extreme monsoon, rains, and flooding have taken a devastating toll on more than 33 million people in Pakistan. And I'm happy to later on explain to you what the Pakistani leadership told me and how it took place. Now, this has left over 1,700 dead, including more than 600 children. Now, as you know, protecting human life and dignity is a fundamental tenet of Canada's approach to the global community. Our humanitarian efforts are aimed at saving lives, alleviating suffering, and maintaining the dignity of people affected by natural disasters. Our early response to this flooding crisis included assistance on the ground in Pakistan through the Canadian Red Cross, Society's Emergency Disaster Assistance Fund, and contributions to the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund, which means things that were already in place. Now, given the magnitude of the flooding and the slow pickup internationally, I authorized an initial amount of $5 million in humanitarian assistance on August 29th. And Mr. Chair, we remain extremely concerned about the magnitude of this crisis. And that is why in mid-September I led a Canadian delegation, including with 3 members of Parliament, to Pakistan to observe firsthand the humanitarian response underway and to gain a better understanding of what the people of Pakistan are going through and what the needs were. And I can tell you that the large parts of southern Pakistan are still underwater. Almost 8 million people are now homeless or living in emergency shelters without little or no access to food and clean drinking water. Now, hundreds of thousands of homes and infrastructure have been destroyed. Crops, livelihood, and livestock have been ruined. Food is scarce. Hunger is also looming. The need for assistance is dire. So, Mr. Chair, members of this committee, so while we remain committed to fighting climate change, advancing women's empowerment, and promoting regional peace and stability, we also recognize the dire plight of the people of Pakistan. On October 4th, the latest joint government of Pakistan and United Nations appeal was launched, increasing the original appeal figure from $160 million US to $860 million. So anticipating the scale of needs, on September 13th, Prime Minister Trudeau announced additional Canadian support and increased our total flood crisis response recovery assistance to $33 million, including a matching fund of up to $7.5 million with the Humanitarian Coalition. This enhanced response means that our government will match dollar-for-dollar donations made by individuals to the Humanitarian Coalitions up to a maximum of $7.5 million. Now, this funding that was generously raised by Canadians will contribute to essential rehabilitation efforts of flood-damaged areas, like the girls' high schools that I visited in the Upper Chitral district in Pakistan. Now, while in Pakistan, I also spent time assessing the needs of frontline workers and announced existing polio eradication programming, specifically the $20 million Eradicating Polio in Pakistan project, and to advocate for the support for female frontline workers who have been impacted by the floods and who are responsible for the unpaid care and care-related work. So, Mr. Chair, we will continue to work with our partners to provide urgent, life-saving humanitarian relief on the ground, and this includes clean drinking water, medical supplies, food, and other essential services. We have a history of over 70 years of successful development cooperation with Pakistan. In the year 2020-21, our overall international assistance to Pakistan was over $100 million. Now, Canada's bilateral development support targets the following priority areas: women and girls, reproductive health and rights, girls' access to education, women's political participation and economic empowerment, COVID-19 relief, and the polio eradication. So we remain committed to this humanitarian effort to support the people of Pakistan in the days ahead, and we know that there's much more to do. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister Sajjan. We now open it to questions. I understand Mr. Genis is first. You have 6 minutes, Mr. Genis.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you, Minister. I suppose you may have anticipated this question. I've been repeatedly raising concern about some of the issues around the matching programs and how they're structured. We've heard at this committee specifically about how your decision to match dollars to some organizations and not others leads to challenges for good organizations, often small diaspora-led organizations, actually being able to fundraise, because people tell them, well, why isn't the government matching contributions to you? And I know the argument we hear back is, well, we want to move quickly, so we just thought it'd be easier to pick organizations that we worked with and things in the past. But the problem is that concretely hurts the ability of small diaspora-led organizations. And there are alternatives that could be pursued that would be just as quick and would take a more inclusive approach. I've raised this issue on Lebanon, on Ukraine. I raised it in the context of the Atlantic floods here in Canada as well, and I've raised it here in this context. But the government isn't responding to these concerns that I've raised and that stakeholders have raised. Why not? Why not the openness to reconsidering how you do matching so that a broader range of organizations can benefit?
So, Mr. Chair, the member asked a very good question. It's some of the questions that I've also asked myself. But having said this, one of the things that we have to do, and first of all, the response is to get a quick response is very important to making sure that we get the money flowing in terms of what the actual needs are, depending on the disaster. So this does not preclude us for supporting other organizations. But keep in mind, though, when we do a matching fund, we already have existing relationships, a system in place, so where we can move very, very quickly. So there's a bunch of options we can take a look at of organizations that we can have pre-existing agreements with. But also, one probably the most important thing, Mr. Chair, that I want to emphasize here, even though we do a matching fund, let's keep in mind we do additional support that we do provide, and this does not preclude any organizations to look at applying for funding for long-term projects. For example, I'll give you one example. There's one organization that I met. They wanted to look at matching fund, but when they talked about the support they could provide, it was about reconstruction of various schools. So what I stated was, I said, listen, those are some of the things that can be done after. Right now we're focused on saving lives. So, we're guiding them to the right place. So what we want to do is anybody that actually has the right mechanism, the right system in place, we want to work with them. We'll try to find ways on how we can best support them.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. You've said that providing this matching program over here doesn't preclude you from offering funding to smaller other organizations outside the Humanitarian Coalition. Of course, that's true, but the point I'm making is that your decision to match funding to some organizations and not others actually hurts the private fundraising of those other organizations that are not included. So even if they have theoretically available opportunities to apply for government funding elsewhere, you are hurting their ability to raise money privately. And what we've heard as well from these organizations is sometimes there's even some suspicion from their longtime donors saying, well, maybe there's this perception that if the government of Canada is not matching their funding, that there's something wrong with them, and that's of course not the case. Are you aware of the damage done to private fundraising by the nature of this?
So one thing, we're not trying, first of all, in any way trying to damage anything. In fact, actually, we love the fact that Canadians and many organizations are coming together, and there's so many causes that are out there, and we want to encourage Canadians to do so. But one thing when it comes to an emergency, like for example in the flood here, we need to make sure that the right resources get to the right time at the right place, and that's very important, right? And so for the first thing, especially in an emergency, that's probably the most important thing. I'll give you an example, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, to kind of outline it. The first and most important thing is actually trying to prevent in the first place. And in fact, actually, funding that was put into place before into Pakistan, I was told when I was visited that it actually saved lives for the early warning system, especially in the north, right? Then you want to put systems in place for emergencies. So that way, when an emergency occurs, it doesn't even require us making a decision. The systems that are being put into place, they automatically respond. So the $5 million that we put into place went into place.
There's a bit of field of the matching issue, but
sorry,
this is a bit of field of the matching issue.
But what I'm trying to say is, I understand that, right? Well, what I'm trying to get at here is the main priority is who can get the best resource to the right area. Trying to assess which organization can do what. When do you have lives that you need to save on the ground? So this is something that when an organization say they can and they can provide emergency, we need to have those dialogues a lot sooner. So we encourage people to have this conversation. So we'll look at anytime that new organization that comes forward, we're happy to work with them.
Yeah. I think one of the issues though is often for these smaller organizations, they're just not in the business of dealing with government very often, right? And there may be some organizations that they're focused on engaging in a particular country or countries. So they're not like the larger humanitarian organizations which you would deal with in any disaster anywhere in the world. You've got organizations that are looking at specific countries, and they're not dealing with you. They're not dealing with government on an ongoing basis. Nonetheless, they're doing great work, and they lose out on these matching programs. What I've had suggested to me by one of the stakeholders as an alternative is, and I believe this is what was done previously under Conservative government, was we said we would match any dollar donated to this effort. But that doesn't necessarily mean the same dollar will go to the same organization. Any dollar contributed will be matched, and we get information from organizations about the dollars that they raise, and then we put that into a fund which they can then apply to. You can announce that kind of matching program right out of the gate. You could start dispensing money from that program right out of the gate. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily fund these smaller organizations. It just means that they're not penalized in terms of their own engagement with donors. Why not pursue that model, Minister?
First of all, we actually did look at that model in terms of what the analysis. In some cases that it has its merits, but it also has its drawbacks as well. So, for example, one of the key things was it took 200 days for originally when the matching fund was done for the money to really start flowing to those organizations because you're raising money, right? And so one of the key for
why need it take that long?
Hear me out, Mr. Chairman. So one of the things is, so for the matching fund that we had here, we had money flowing within 30 days, right? So the key thing is you have to do the assessment. As you know, at the end of the day, any dollars that we sign off on, we're accountable to Parliament, right? We're accountable to the taxpayer. So any organization that we give money to, we do have to do the due diligence. So this is where we need, anybody who wants, any organization that wants to, it's easier to work and get the process kind of sorted out early on. But again,
spend it fast, but match for any organization. Yeah. That's my point. Spend it fast. Thanks.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Zuberi. You have 6 minutes, Mr. Zuberi.
I'd like to thank you, Minister, for being here, and for all of your officials for being here also with us on this extremely important issue about flooding in Pakistan. I want to pick up on, first off, I was in Pakistan in June for 4 weeks, and I did see the initial aspects of these monsoon rains and how it was impacting very early on the country with felled bridges and roads being filled with rocks and whatnot because of landslides. And I appreciate very much how you and 3 other parliamentarians went to Pakistan in mid-September. I applaud you for that. That is, I think, very important. Could you very briefly outline the assistance that we have given thus far to Pakistan and how that has hit the ground?
No, thanks. If I can just, Mr. Chair, also highlight the fact that we knew that the monsoons were going to be a little bit more severe, but the thing is, the situation actually got worse. There was slow pickup actually inside the country, as I was briefed on, but also even in the international community. Normally, when it comes to, so what I try to focus on is what are the actual needs? Where do we move the money very quickly? We visited places where we had warehouses already in place with stores that actually had the impact immediately. So before anything, we already had systems already in place. So the $5 million was to look at the immediate needs to the various organizations. Then the next step was to do a very quick needs assessment based on the reporting that comes. That's what we did, was adding the $25 million additional funding. Then that buys you enough time to, as you work with the other organizations. Now, keep in mind, we actually are proportionally, Canada, we did much higher than other countries. So the next step is, now that this gives us a little bit more time, there are still more emergency things that we need to do. So, for example, we got to prevent disease, given the waterborne diseases. Some of the schools have to be rebuilt. We need to look at winterization, and we're looking at that now. So funding is already moving towards that. The government of Pakistan has just finished their own needs assessment, so we're just reviewing that now. So then we'll look at the next tranche of funding to support them. And then the next portion of it will be the longer term. How do we look at climate mitigation, adaptation, and some of the bigger measures?
So you touched upon climate, and I'd like to touch upon that. That's been a major conversation with respect to the flooding and how Pakistan has only contributed 0.4% of the world emissions, whereas other countries such as America, 21.5% of world emissions to date, China 16.5%, European Union 15% of world emissions. I'm curious around equity, around the impacts of how the emissions and climate change has impacted this country in question. And if you can speak a bit about, my understanding is that there is an international climate finance being delivered within Pakistan. Is any of Canada's $5.3 billion for that being delivered there? So you can just speak on this subject, this theme.
Thanks. I'll give you the wave tops, and then I'll have Chris and the team get into a little bit more details on it. So just on this, first of all, I do want to state that even I publicly went out and stated that the most vulnerable on this planet end up suffering the impacts of a climate change that they had nothing to do with. And Pakistan is in that situation. So we do need to support them. And I'll give you an example. So right now, there's a Green Climate Fund. Canada contributed $600 million to that, and of that, $120 million went to Pakistan for this. So these are funding that's already going. So we will look at additional funding from our additional support from the climate adaptation side to look at the long-term aspect of things. Chris, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, thank you. So Canada, over the past, for the past 10 years, has contributed to numerous large multilateral funds. For example, the creation of the Green Climate Fund was one of the principal outcomes coming out of the Copenhagen COP back in 2012. The purpose of that is absolutely to do exactly what you've noted, which is there are countries that have contributed very little to greenhouse gas emissions, but do not have the fiscal capacities to actually respond to both the adaptation and the mitigation. Canada is being one of the major donors to these funds, and the work of Minister Guilbeault, for example, along with our German colleagues, to outline the complete the contributions that all donor countries have given to the $100 billion goal, and that this is one of the examples of that.
Thank you. And my last question is around, on August 17, 2022, our Foreign Affairs Minister, who I know you work very closely with, Melanie Joly, spoke with Pakistan's Foreign Affairs Minister, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. And that was the first interaction between ministers. Can you speak a bit about the bilateral relations and sources of cooperation and concern?
So actually, I had the opportunity to actually meet with the Prime Minister as well when I was there, and met with many we need to look at providing what type of support, but we also need to look at some of the supporting them in other ways as well. So this is, I think, was an opportunity for me to get a firsthand look, and not only what they're going through, but also look at what the opportunities are. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that will come up, and I think through this this tragedy will come a greater opportunity for us to have greater people-to-people ties and even greater economic opportunity.
Thank you.
Now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to come back to the last but one question that was asked by Mr. Zuberi. I'm very happy to see him with us once again today, particularly since it's thanks to him that the Foreign Affairs Committee is looking into this question. But I'd also like to greet the Minister and the public servants and the officials who are here with us. In a few minutes, we'll be discussing the situation in Haiti. And Mr. Minister, I am convinced that you would also like to follow this committee's work as far as Haiti is concerned. At the beginning of, I believe that after the pandemic, we'll be up to the task. Now, when it comes to Pakistan, you know the interest members of this committee have on this topic. And it is unfortunate that you decided to bring with you only ministerial assistants, deputy assistants, at a time when we are looking for one voice on the international scene on humanitarian voices like that of support to Pakistan that is facing an unprecedented natural disaster. I think it would have been useful for you to bring along with you members of the opposition as well to avoid some types of questions today, because it will have allowed all political parties to have a better idea on the situation on the field. That being said, let me come back to the question that was asked by Mr. Zuberi. Simply to say that the climate fund provided for the next 5 years for developing countries for this program, Global Affairs representative told the committee that Pakistan could make a request, but as far as he knew, Canada has not yet received any request. But as has been stated, the Green Fund, the multilateral and regional climate funds that Canada contribute to, and again, this was told to us by the public officials in October, said that there have been 3 requests from Pakistan. How do you explain that this fund has not, or rather, this has not received, there have been no requests from Pakistan, whereas others have received requests from Pakistan? The $5.3 billion fund does not meet the expectations of countries like Pakistan. Is it because it doesn't respond to the needs of countries like Pakistan? And is that why countries like Pakistan have not made a request via these funds?
And I just want to also say I'm so appreciative of this committee focusing on Pakistan. Pakistan, the floods itself did not get the attention that it deserved, and what was actually taking place there. And just want to let you know, I too am following Haiti very closely and look forward to the work that this committee does. And I'm happy to, if members of Parliament are interested in bidding certain parts, happy to take a look at those opportunities as well. In this case, we had to move just because of the time, and we had to move very quickly, and having 3 members of Parliament who are actually from Pakistan. So happy to work on that. But when it comes to the funding, so when it comes to the certain requests, there's been the needs assessment that recently just came in. So requests come in different ways. Sometimes it's going to be working from our High Commission directly to the High Commission here through our multilateral organizations. So there's many different ways that is done. In fact, actually, we had a laundry list of things that was actually needed. So this is one of the reasons why when we do the initial providing of support, Normally, that initial amount is actually a lot lower than what we did, but because the pickup wasn't there, we actually went considerably higher. And then we also, by making that visit, one of the key things I also wanted to highlight was, and having 3 members of parliament who are of a Pakistani descent, is to highlight that Canada does care. And I know everybody also in this committee is for this. So we will continually take a look at where those the needs assessment are. When it comes to our larger $5.3 billion, remember this was put into place for what we're doing internationally. So that work was already going. We will take a look at what we can do for Pakistan. But as the needs assessment kind of continues, we will look at that long-term adaptation piece. Not want to say down the road. We just got to get through the emergency piece out of the way first. And the reason I say this, I was very happy with some of the work that was done after the previous flood. So the money that was put in previously actually helped to save lives. I don't know how many times people came up to me and said, thank you very much for the funding that created the early warning system. It had saved lives. They practiced those drills in northern Pakistan, in those villages, and hundreds of lives were actually saved. So they appreciated that Canada actually listened to what those actual needs were, and will continue to do just this. So we'll look at the next tranche of funding, of support. I know there's a key issue. We need to make sure that the vulnerable communities within Pakistan also get the appropriate support. So we're going to be taking a closer look, take a closer look at that, and then we need to take a look at not just from our own department what we can do, but others as well. But more importantly, what the international community, and I would say that Canada has been a very strong voice of bringing support to Pakistan because it hasn't been highlighted. And I was very happy that the Secretary General from the United Nations also visited as well.
Monsieur le Président, il me reste...
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? Inaudible for the interpreter.
You're out of time, over 6 minutes. So now we will go. Finally, we will go to Ms. McPherson. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to welcome the minister to our committee. I have many questions for him. He won't be surprised to hear that. And I actually, we had the opportunity to hear from CSOs and hear from experts and hear from members of his department about the humanitarian response in Pakistan, and I'm very grateful for their testimony. But I do want to ask some questions with regards to some of the other outstanding issues, I guess. And the first one I want to ask him about is, again, he won't be surprised to hear this, but the humanitarian carve-out that we have still not seen for Afghanistan. Minister, this has been, well over a year. It's very desperate. There are millions of people whose lives are at risk. Could you be very specific on where the holdup is on that? I know you have said that you are working on this, but we are really running out of time. I'm just wondering if it's your ministry, if it is another ministry, where civil society, where advocates should be putting their pressure to push to make sure that this humanitarian carve-out finally happens.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer these questions because I guess Afghanistan is next to Pakistan, so we can talk about it. But Mr. Chair, the member raises, again, a very good point. One of the things that is stated is, yes, the current legislation does put constraints on us on how we spend the money, and that's the reality. But I can tell you, just as I stated before, there hasn't been $1 that we have held back from supporting. In fact, actually, we have put $156 million. Nonetheless, those concerns are currently being addressed by my colleagues and looking at various options. And when those options are developed, myself and my colleagues will be able to say more. Having said this, we are also looking at the support for the Afghan refugees that are in Pakistan as well, and we're just going through some of that work before we can make it public in terms of what we'll be supporting. Thank you.
Oh, which colleagues are those? Because, it has been since August 2021.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I know that the committee processes have a lot of latitude when a minister is appearing for estimates or supplementary estimates. This is a very specific study that is very limited on one issue, which is Pakistan and the flood and the disaster relief. And I have every confidence the minister can answer these questions, but the committee's time is very limited and very valuable, and we're trying to get the most we can about Pakistan. I think it would be appropriate to advise the member that we should be trying to talk about Pakistan and the flooding. Afghanistan's an important issue, and we can do a study on it, but this is a very important issue that we've been asked to study.
Mr. Oliphant, yes, given that we have limited time to focus on the issue of Pakistan, I would ask all members to keep their questions relevant to the study at hand.
Just on the point of
Thank
order.
you, Mr. Chair.
But point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Jonas.
I would just say each member controls their own time, and I would think that members should be able to ask the questions they want to ask that relate broadly to the topic. I think the line of questioning was very reasonable, and if you want to sound out the committee's view on it as a whole, I think you'll find a majority of the committee wants to allow this line of questioning. I certainly am interested in the answers.
Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Ms. McPherson, the floor is
Thank you,
yours.
Mr. Chair. And I would just like to point out that the minister is here with our committee, and we don't have very many opportunities to ask these questions, and this is a very pressing question. He did bring up Afghans that are in Pakistan, so perhaps I will touch on that next. It has been since August 2021 since we have been trying to get people here, and it does continuously sound like it is we're working on it sort of answer, and I don't think that's sufficient when we are so far into this particular crisis. It's not fair to Afghans that worked for our country. It's not fair for Afghans that depend on Canada to stand up for them. But I can turn to another line of questioning, the climate financing. Could the minister tell me how much of the climate financing will be part of our dedicated ODA? Will it all be considered ODA, official development assistance?
Mr. Chair, just to talk about the Afghan refugees that are in Pakistan, because they were affected by the floods, I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more on that. I actually did speak with the Prime Minister and other ministers about the situation. There are some people who are actually ready to leave, but Pakistan has to give them exit permits. So we asked them to expedite that, and I was assured by the Prime Minister that they will look at this, and then we'll look at the other support that we can provide. And when it comes to some of the budgetary concern, what's within our ODA, I can turn to Chris on that.
Yep, the very... The very short answer, Mr. Chair, is that all of our climate finance is considered ODA, official development assistance.
Mr. McClellan, if your department could possibly provide us a little bit of written information, I don't want to waste your time. You may not have those numbers right now, but the amount of funds that have actually been spent to date, whether they've gone bilaterally or multilaterally, and one other question I have for you, Minister. This fund does not appear to have any mechanisms or any way for small, medium organizations to access it, for the partnership branch to access it. It is all multilateral and bilateral. How are you ensuring that these funds go to those groups that most could use them? So we know that Indigenous groups, we know that women's groups tend to develop more appropriate on-the-ground climate mitigation and adaptation projects. But when we are giving our money at the top level, how do you ensure that that's actually happening on the ground?
Well, first of all, Mr. Chair, I'm actually really glad the member raised this issue. So one thing is, just because we have the $5.3 billion, it doesn't mean the other funding that we provide to, whether it's agriculture, does not include supporting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And actually, some of the things that I'm actually really proud of is through FIEP that we launched in 2017, we're seeing the positive impact. So, for example, women entrepreneurship in agriculture. And I've seen gone to many different countries.
Sorry, Mr. Minister, I don't want to interrupt you, but does any of the climate financing, the specific climate financing, I mean, obviously Global Affairs funds projects that support agriculture. But I'm looking at this climate financing.
Yes.
Does it support? Is there a mechanism to ensure that it can support Indigenous and women-led initiatives?
Yes, and Chris, you want to mention that? Go ahead.
Maybe turn it over to our Director General.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair. Yes, there is a $300 million targeted program for women-led organizations, as well as a $15 million initiative for Indigenous organizations.
Thank you. Could you provide written detail on how that's been spent or distributed to date?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, am I done, or do I have some time
Yes,
left?
you're over 6 minutes, Ms. McPherson.
Thank you.
So we will now go to proceed to second round. Mr. Jennings, you're up first. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just brief follow-up on the issue of Afghanistan. I agree that there is an urgent need for legislative or policy change to address this issue to allow Canadian organizations to be involved in the humanitarian effort. The perversity of the current situation, I think, is that the Canadian government ends up funding international organizations that aren't subject to the same strictures while Canadian organizations face limitations. Could you give us a timeline when we can expect the results of that work allegedly being done to be made public?
Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I can't give you a timeline for it. Like I said, my colleagues are working on it. But this is one of the reasons why when any legislation is put forward, like when the previous government put this in, it wasn't taken into account to take a look at this. No one anticipated that the Taliban would come back into power. So this is one of the reasons why now my colleagues are making sure that so once the legislation goes in, they look at all aspects of things, so you don't come into another situation.
Thank you,
like
Minister. I was hoping to get a timeline, and I'm sorry that we don't have that available. Minister, the floods underline the fact that Pakistan and other developing countries in Asia have a great need for infrastructure, and there's various ways that we can respond to it. The Government of Canada has about $400 million in the Chinese state-controlled Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The Chinese government seeks to have significant influence in Pakistan. This bank is part of the Belt and Road Initiative and uses infrastructure as a tool for increasing Chinese state influence. When it comes to our efforts to support reconstruction in Pakistan, why is the government continuing to have money in this Chinese state-controlled development bank? Why not instead fund those efforts directly or through independent organizations that share our political values?
So, Mr. Chair, when it comes to infrastructure or supporting any countries, we'll look at all options. We'll look at all options of where we can provide support. We're going to be looking whether it's any development banks, from bilateral support through multilateral. So we'll look at any options that we can to making sure we provide support. When it comes to providing humanitarian support to the most vulnerable, for my thing is coming into this role, we want to stay focused on the people, putting the geopolitical dynamics out of this.
Yeah, but why are Canadian dollars still in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, though? I mean, given the impact on real people that the extension of Chinese state neocolonialism has on those people.
Well, Mr. Chair, right now, in terms of Pakistan, we are focused on real people and the most vulnerable, and we'll continue to support them.
Okay, I don't think that's an answer, but the record will show the exchange, and people can conclude what they like from it. In the past, I've raised with you concerns about corruption and sexual exploitation at the World Health Organization. You've said at other points that you had raised that issue with WHO leadership, but you couldn't point to any specific steps. It's been, I think, a couple years since we last had that exchange. Obviously, WHO is operating in Pakistan and many other places. There have been further scandals that have come out since around corruption in Syria, further revelations around sexual abuse in DRC and other places. What further steps have you taken to hold the WHO accountable for corruption and sexual exploitation? And what is the point at which this goes beyond simply raising verbal concerns?
So, Mr. Chair, not only about raising concerns with the WHO, but any organizations, we stay steadfast. I mean, as you know, our Feminist International Assistance Policy is focused on women, everything from sexual reproductive health all the way to making sure that there's women entrepreneurship. In fact, actually, in terms of it,
Minister, I am going to jump in there. I want you to just maybe address very specifically the issues of the WHO. What are you going to do to hold the WHO accountable?
I am trying to answer the overall question, especially about Pakistan. Mr. Chair, I think it's important that since we're talking about Pakistan, I want to share an example for you of how important that work is. So, for example, the polio teams that go out, and this is probably one of the most important things that I learned there. They're made up of women going into some rural areas, including including dealing with.
What are you
going
to do to hold the WHO accountable?
No, okay, you got to hear me out in terms of how we're making a change in many different ways.
That wasn't my question.
I've already answered your questions regarding the WHO and what we're doing in many other organizations, but you also want to hear what the work that we're doing in Pakistan at the grassroots level for supporting women.
But, Minister, the WHO is an organization that receives money from Canada, and the scandal was multiple cases of sexual exploitation, of threats towards women involving WHO employees. And specifically, what are you going to do to hold that organization accountable? We keep hearing revelations out of this, and it's great to say we're doing some good work over here, but what are the steps you're taking to hold the WHO accountable?
Work over here. When it comes to supporting women, we're actually seeing tangible results. And the examples that I was trying to give about Pakistan, since this committee is
WHO
studying
Minister.
about that.
That's the question.
Right? But that's the point. I've already answered your question regarding WHO in terms of all our funding that we
so
provide.
The answer is you've raised the issue verbally.
We hold them to account, and if there's, we'll take other steps when it comes to this.
What steps will you take? When it comes
to the exact examples, listen, if you do care about supporting women, I'm trying to give you examples of a clear example from Pakistan.
No, I want you to tell me what steps you have taken and are prepared to take to hold the WHO accountable for this increasing pattern of corruption and abuse. It's a very simple question.
I made it very clear. On my first meeting, I raised the issues, asked my team in terms of exactly what is taking place, looked at those results, and our teams on the ground
the funding
will take a
continues. There's no additional conditions to funding. There's no additional requirements around funding to say that we are not going to fund programs unless we see a higher standard. Have you imposed additional conditions on funding?
We have a high standard when it comes to all the organizations, including WHO.
What additional conditions have you imposed on WHO funding?
When it comes,
I suspect none.
Mr. Jennis, you're out of time. We now go to Mr. Oliphant.
Thanks. I'm going to split the time with Mr. Sarai as well. Thank you, Minister and Deputy and officials for being here. I'm trying to figure out the scope of the appeal that is going on right now. I know that under the OCHA documents, it's about $472 million is being requested. But then I've read a press release from the UN in Pakistan and the government of Pakistan that it's been revised to over $800 million. Do we have a working figure? All that is telling me is this is a mess and it is a humanitarian disaster, and we're still grasping with what's going on. I'm just wondering whether we have an idea of what this next midterm, not the long-term redevelopment, but this next midterm phase is about.
So, I can have folks talk about what the UN in terms of the next steps in a second here. But so one of the things that we also learned during this visit is the flooding is actually taken on their agricultural land. So not only the crop that was actually there, but the next year's crop is also going to be damaged. So we're looking at, in terms of how do you support the livelihoods of people, to making sure that we prevent the waterborne diseases. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. But I know the teams on the ground, including the UN and Tara, can explain in detail about that.
Indeed. So from the humanitarian perspective, so emergency response only, the needs assessments have been completed to date. The overall figure is $816 million is the appeal, carrying us from the onset of the flooding until May 2023. The discrepancies in the numbers is $472 million is required to take us to the end of December. Okay. And the remainder will flow from January until May. So they've actually done the look out to how to continue these until the medium to longer term work can take hold once waters have receded.
Are we going to be able to be revising our contributions in line with that as well?
So our contributions took into account the entirety of the appeal, but of course we always, in an emergency context, continue to revisit as information becomes available.
I mean, when I look at our ranking among countries in terms of humanitarian assistance, on one we're number 5 in the world, and one we're number 7 in the world. We're there, and people in my riding of Don Valley West, particularly in Thorncliffe Park, Pakistani origin, want us to be there. And
yep.
So my appeal to you is that we keep this open. We keep our matching contributions as something that could change in the future. And that's my appeal to you today on behalf of those constituents as we do that. I'll turn to my colleague.
Thank you, Minister. I want to thank you for first going out there to Pakistan. My constituents have a considerable diaspora of Pakistani people and people from Punjab, which was a heavy region affected from there. Our city raised over $500,000, and they were actually very happy with the matching fund, and want to applaud you for that, and also the aid that the government gave in that regards. What I'd like to hear is a lot of them want to know where Canada's funds went. Where did it help in terms of humanitarian and on the ground? If you could elaborate on that and tell us where those funding went.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll just explain the previous questions regarding the additional funding. Absolutely. In fact, actually, one of the key things for me is to making sure where the needs actually are. So we've provided the initial emergency funding. Then once the needs assessment is done, we'll provide more, and then we'll start looking at the how do we getting into the climate adaptation and prevention stage. So more funding will be coming, and we'll make sure that the members know about it. And in terms of the exact where things are gone, I'll give you, if you don't mind, a few areas. One of the key areas we wanted to focus on was the immediate needs when it comes to shelter. We wanted to put funding directly into where preventing waterborne diseases. In fact, actually, I was trying to get to is the National Emergency Center in Pakistan. The polio teams that they have were already best suited because they were already going out made up of women. So what we have done is, because they had to focus on looking after their families, we're actually providing care funding for them so they can actually then go out and continue their work, because they've been now turned into or transformed into health teams. So we're helping to fund them. Plus, if there's, do you have the list? Anybody has a list of exactly what we're providing? Or I can get that to you afterwards if you like.
Sure, that would be great. Also, did Pakistan or Canada identify areas that Canada can help in the future to mitigate flood-related damages? Because this seems to be something that may happen again and again due to climate change. Where can we help infrastructure-wise, engineering, civil engineering, placement of people, construction methods, etc. Have they brought up those, and is there places where Canada's identified where they can provide assistance?
So not only they raised it, I've raised it myself that we will be providing support, but we can't get into that just yet because we don't know what the needs will be. One of the things we're also looking at almost immediately is the water that's in the south right now has no place to go. So I'm trying to figure out the engineering solution, how to get the water flowing, because the rivers were already flowing, so it can't go anywhere. Plus, the ground is completely saturated. So those are the areas that we're looking at. Once we have a better assessment, we'll have a better idea of what we'll do in the long term.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Now we go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. UNDP on the 28th of October published a loss assessment following the flooding in Pakistan and estimates the total damage at more than $14 million for economic losses that go up to $15.2 US. And the needs will be at least $16 million US for rehabilitation. The amount promised on the international scene, in your opinion, will this help meet the needs of people following the flooding? And my second question, having been Minister of Public Safety in Quebec, I know that Quebec and the provinces could be helpful when it comes to the needs that have been identified in reinforcing the risk capacity, early alert systems, risk management in disasters, climate resilience and planning, and upscaling of evaluation systems. So my question is as follows. Have you sought assistance from Quebec and the provinces to provide their assistance in Canada's efforts to help Pakistan?
Mr. Chair, first of all, to answer the question very directly, will we meet the international community currently will meet the needs? The answer is no. And what I'm hoping to do, and also the work that your committee is doing, is highlighting what the actual needs currently are, and the needs are great. We've been there providing probably a greater proportional funding support, and we will do more. And I'm happy to we'll work with any province that would be wanting to either make a direct connection and work with us directly to provide that support. I think it's going to be needed. I think every province has a unique experience to offer up, and so I appreciate the offer, and I'd love to be able to follow up on it.
Monsieur le Président, me reste...
Mr. Chair, do I have any time left?
Left. Mr. Bergeron.
Oh. Alors, le Premier ministre...
The Prime Minister of Pakistan said Pakistanis had become climate refugees in their own country, and observers have insisted on the role of climate change in the flooding in Pakistan. We often hear of climate refugees, people who have to leave their countries because of climate change. We are dealing with a special category here. What do you think of the Prime Minister of Pakistan's remarks?
Impacts, if we don't do something in our own countries here, it's going to be the most vulnerable are going to suffer around the world. And so we need to do something about it.
Thank you, Minister. We now go to Ms. McPherson. You have 2.5 minutes, Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to follow up on the questions that Mr. Bergeron was just asking. We do know that Pakistan contributed just a fraction of the greenhouse gas impacts of climate change, and yet they are having to wear the challenges of climate change. And we do know that the climate funding that we have put forward is part now of our ODA. Minister, do you believe that Canada's ODA should be increased?
As Mr. Chair, as you know, our government committed to showing growth within our ODA budget, and you've seen that already. And one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we continue to make every effort that it's in line with our international assistance policy, and we're seeing a direct impact on the ground. And like, for example, one example of what I was trying to talk about earlier. Because we always take our policy looking through women, we're actually having a greater impact on the ground for supporting the most vulnerable through those polio vaccination teams that are made up of women, by providing support for them so that their families can be looked after. It means now.
Thank you, Minister. I don't have very much time. I'm so sorry. In terms of ODA, how are you advocating for those increases? Because as you know, right now, Canada is at about 0.3%. We have promised to get to 0.7%. We never have gotten to 0.7%. And in fact, right now at 0.3%, we're well below many of the other democracies, similar democracies to Canada in the world. I'm wondering how you're advocating. What are you doing as the Minister for International Development to advocate for more ODA for Canadian organizations?
Well, Mr. Chair, I can assure the member that I'm advocating extremely strongly within my own colleagues. I'm not going to get into the exact details how I speak to with my colleagues, but I welcome the support from the member and any others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We now go to Mr. Jennis. You have 2.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I wanted to get this in, Minister. According to a report in the Associated Press, UN operations in Syria have dealt heavily with regime-affiliated human rights abusers. The report suggests that almost half of the procurement contracts involve companies involved in or profiting from human rights abuses. Now, incredibly to me, about a quarter of contracts went to companies owned or partially owned by individuals directly sanctioned by ourselves or our allies. So we have a situation where, on the one hand, our development assistance has stringent conditions associated with it for Canadian organizations that limit our ability to do good work in the context of Afghanistan, as we've talked about. But at the same time, we're giving money to the UN and other multilateral organizations with serious corruption problems, and also who are doing business with, who are procuring goods from one of the world's most heinous regimes and their enablers. We need to put a stop to this. So I want to ask specifically, will you commit to withdrawing funds from organizations, UN-affiliated or otherwise, that don't have acceptable human rights standards? And how will you seek to challenge these kinds of procurement practices in the context of Pakistan and other contexts to make sure that we are no longer, through our contributions to the UN, giving money to people that we're supposed to be sanctioning?
Mr. Chair, do you want me to take questions that are not related to Pakistan? I'm happy.
So it is related.
Okay. I don't think it is related to Pakistan, but happy to.
So let me just clarify.
Let me answer your question now.
Please,
okay,
please.
Thank you. So, first of all, I haven't seen that report. I'm happy now that made aware of it. I'll happy to talk to a team if they've seen it and take a look at it. One thing I can commit to when it comes to human rights violations, something that not only we take very seriously and we take a very aggressive approach on this. But one thing I can commit to you: we will work with organizations to support the most vulnerable. Right, and we'll do this all over the world. will help to improve the United Nations assistance, will help to improve any other organizations that are out there. But one of the things is clear, when it comes to the funding that we do provide, we want to support the most vulnerable, and we want to make sure done in a transparent way. This is one of the reasons why we actually have very strict conditions on when we look at providing the money, and when something is done, that we can actually learn about it and take further action on it.
So, Minister, I'm sorry you haven't seen the report. I'd welcome a follow-up on that, because if we're giving money to organizations that are procuring from sanctioned individuals and entities, that clearly is not good for people. That clearly is not advancing the values that we're supposed to be standing for. And it's relevant in Pakistan. It's relevant anywhere we operate. How are we making sure that if we're giving money to UN-affiliated organizations that have this kind of track record in Syria, that they're not procuring from sanctioned individuals or from individuals that are involved in human rights abuses? That's really important and really relevant to the conversation we're having. So I hope you would take a firm line on that.
No, in fact, I not only do, but I can also show you great examples of when you visit some of the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya or many other places, and the World Food Program, many other organizations, the work that they're doing to save many lives. So when it comes to the work, absolutely we need to do it, and any issues that do come up, we need to deal with it. Thanks for identifying that.
Slot goes to Mr. Oliphant. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Minister, for being here. I want to stick to Pakistan, and I want to stick to the emergency crisis that is at hand, and to the over 30 million people who have been affected by this, and perhaps the whole country, frankly, not just the 30 million, but maybe up to 100 million people who are really affected by this. I think that is critical for this committee to deal with at this time, and I think that is also what people in our ridings are wanting us to deal with. How do we get our information on the ground? Because it's a fluid situation. I don't mean a pun. It's a difficult situation that is constantly changing. Is our High Commission able to handle this? Do we have outside sources? How do we get on the ground information which is constantly changing in difficult areas to reach?
I'm glad you raised that. This is one of the probably when it comes to difficult areas. This is one of those long-standing relationships that we have with many organizations that work in different areas. Up to, for example, the Humanitarian Coalition. My first briefing with them, they talked about how the earthquake in Pakistan took place in remote areas. They had the ability and the connection within those communities, the Islamic Relief Coalition, to be able to get that information. So we have many links through our long-term partners, but also working directly with the Pakistani government, the National Command Center, which our folks are directly connected with. So there's multiple different sources that can get that information. And Pakistan did actually set up a good system that we saw from the national, provincial, right down to the municipal level, where the information does get fed and then decisions are appropriately made. And this is where our High Commission folks are directly tapped into.
Very good. Is there anything you want to leave with the committee that we have not had a chance to ask you about?
Just one thing, Mr. Chair. It's one of the things I think when it comes to this portfolio, we want to support the most vulnerable. I think that we can all agree. Again, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the committee for raising this. When the Pakistani floods, we heard about it. It did not get the attention that it deserved. I mean, when I visit, I've been to a lot of conflict areas. I've been to a lot of flood areas in Canada and other places, even in South Sudan. This was atrocious. It is imagine, take one of our provinces and 1/3 of it is underwater. Bringing attention to it. There's a lot of things that are going on, horrible things that are going on in the world, and we do need to support all that. But we got to make sure that we're there for the most vulnerable. For the most vulnerable, and I also want to thank some of the work that was done in the past. I don't know how many times it came up to me saying the previous work that was done after from the previous flood that has saved a lot of lives. By working together, we're able to kind of continue that work for people. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you, Deputy Minister McClellan, Mr. Gibbons, Ms. Carney, Ms. Doe. Very grateful for your testimony and also for having made yourselves available to the committee. Now, we will suspend briefly before we proceed with the study on Haiti. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022, and Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, the committee resumes its study of the current situation in Haiti. It is now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mr. Sébastien Carrière, the Ambassador of Canada to Haiti, as well as Mr. Sébastien Seguin, Executive Director in Haiti. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses who just joined us by video conference. Please click on the microphone to activate your mic, and please mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation is at the bottom of your screen of either, and the three options consist of floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. You will be given 5 minutes for your remarks, after which we will proceed to a round of questions. I will signal you when you only have 1 minute remaining. Now, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try to keep my remarks as brief as possible to give more time to exchanges. Haiti has experienced chronic political unrest for many years. This situation was exacerbated by the assassination of President Moise in July 2021, which created a constitutional and institutional vacuum, setting the stage for the current political and humanitarian crisis. More recently, gangs supported by the Haitian elite and others have expanded their territorial control over the country and are now occupying the Varo port, which allow for the main fuel terminal in the country. And there's also been a cholera crisis. It is enough to look at some data to understand the extent of the crisis in Haiti. 4.7 million people are facing acute hunger. There are more than 113,000 internally displaced people. According to the latest figures, there are more than 52 deaths from cholera and nearly 3,000 suspected or confirmed cases. Children under 9 years old are the most affected. In response to this humanitarian and security crisis, Prime Minister Henry wrote to Canada and other friendly countries on October 9th to request military assistance to secure the critical infrastructure and free up road access between the capital and the rest of the country. In the days following, the UN Secretary General proposed to the Security Council the deployment of a rapid response force.
For decades, we have invested close to $2 billion since 2010, including significant investments to strengthen security in Haiti. Canada's leadership is not only about our investments or foreign aid, it is also about the sustained engagement of our Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs in mobilizing international partners, as you will have seen the various high-level events and engagements chaired by Canada over the last few months. The international community seems clearly committed to support Haitians' authorities to restore order and allow the flow of fuel and goods, and to ensure that critical humanitarian assistance is provided to the population. But to ensure that we make the right decisions, the Government of Canada established an interdepartmental mission that has been consulting with Haitian stakeholders, regional partners, the UN, CARICOM, and others to assess options for the international response and the role Canada could play in finding a solution. The mission has just returned from Haiti, and we'll be discussing their findings with partners to identify a path forward for the international community. Comme l'a déclaré hier, dimanche matin.
As Minister Joly stated yesterday, impunity is not an option, and the Canadian government is now considering sanctions and other measures against those who support armed gangs and armed trafficking in Haiti, including those who may reside in Canada. Canada will be part of a resolution adopted by the UN Security Council some 10 days ago. Canada is well positioned to work with its key allies to support the Haitian authorities' efforts to find a solution to the humanitarian and security crisis, and in the longer term, to establish an inclusive dialogue that will lead to free and democratic elections. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. We now open the floor to questions, and the first slot goes to Mr. Epp. Mr. Epp, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, for your testimony. Whenever I think of the island that Haiti is situated on, I'm reminded of the importance of governance with the differential outcomes for people, the Haitians, and on the other end of the island. And so governance is important. So I want to start there, Mr. Ambassador. You mentioned Canada's long-term leadership position in Haiti. Canada and the U.S. are the #1 and #2 donors to that country international. What are the international expectations on Canada in this crisis?
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's the expectations are fairly high, I would say. I think we all saw the coverage, the media coverage from the visit by Secretary Blinken to Ottawa last year, and some of the articles before and during the visit. Indeed, Canada, people expect Canada to take on a leadership role. We have a very good reputation in Haiti. We're well respected. People come to us seeking our advice, our views on what they could do. And that's important to leverage that in the favor of a good resolution to this current crisis for Haiti. But also, I think this has to be a group effort. No one country can swoop in here and solve problems that have been going on since the fall of the dictatorship, and some would argue even before. So I think it's important to be modest and to consult, and that this be a group effort. One of the things that we did 2 weeks ago, I think it was, the Prime Minister had a call with CARICOM leaders. It was a leader-level call, I believe, to seek views of countries in the neighborhood. You mentioned Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic was on that call as a member of CARICOM. And to see how we can leverage the regional alliances in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Ambassador. I hear you saying two things. Can I ask you to be a little more specific? What is Canada's position on the United Nations potential resolution versus the initiative being floated by the United States and Mexico?
So there's two resolutions. One has been adopted. That one is the sanctions resolution, and we're 100% behind that. And we worked really hard behind the scenes to make that happen, and we're glad it did. Then there's another resolution that's on the table this week, I believe, in New York, about a forced resolution, and no decision has been made on that. That was part of what the assessment team came here to do last week. They're continuing their consultations this week. They're briefing up in terms of what their findings are, and the discussions continue in New York. And it's very much a fast-moving file, so we'll see what today, tomorrow, and the next couple of days bring.
So, sir, you referenced sanctions. Who are those sanctions targeting?
So there's one individual that was actually named by the resolution, and this is Jimmy Cherizier. He's a former police lieutenant, and he's known as Barbecue. That's his gang name. And he was specifically named by the UN Security Council. Now, that doesn't really help because this man, of course, is a criminal and lives in a cash economy and doesn't have holdings outside of Haiti. But I think it was the symbol that was important. That's why he was included. What we really want to get at is sanctioning, yes, gang leaders, but also the people who facilitate and finance their work. It's a well-known fact in Haiti that sometimes there are demonstrations that are real demonstrations where people come out and express their disagreement with the government or with a policy, but there are also demonstrations that are bought and paid for that aim to destabilize the country because somebody doesn't like one decision or another. So it's that we're trying to sort out. There are links between the political level and the gangs, and there are links between the political, the gangs, and some members of the economic elite. Not all of them, but some. So that's those are the people we're trying to get at, sort of breaking the quote-unquote system.
Thank you, sir. Following the meetings with Secretary Blinken last week, it was reported that our foreign minister made the statement that Canada wanted to get it right. You mentioned that our assessment teams are just back from Haiti. So addressing wanting to get it right, my understanding is Canada did back the previous administration after the assassination of President Moïse, and that did support Ariel Henry. Am I correct in that? And if so, does that mean Canada didn't get it right because of the allegations of association of that regime or this regime to the gang activity?
So, I mean, there's a lot of allegations out there. I think those need to be looked at carefully and evaluated. I think you're correct that the government of Canada supported Ariel Henry with a group of other countries last summer. But I would just say that the sitting president, Jovenel Moïse, named him. And then, of course, he was assassinated a couple of days after that. So what we've been promoting as Canada for over a year now is an inclusive political dialogue that leaves no one behind and where everyone can agree on a transition government that can take the country back to an election and democracy. Unfortunately,
in that dialogue, how big a voice does the Montana group carry?
They have a very big voice. I would argue that they have a very big voice, maybe more outside of Haiti than in Haiti, but they do represent a vast coalition of civil society organizations. Some of which are very important, we've they clearly have a seat at the table. We think they need to be part of the solution. It's a constellation of organizations, so I'm not sure how homogenous it really is. But for me, I mean, it has to be all hands on deck. It can't be politics as usual, where one faction tries to outweigh the other and so on and so forth. It shouldn't even be about politics. It should be about Haiti. You heard the numbers I said earlier.
Yeah.
I don't think the country can afford itself the luxury of a sustained political crisis. I think everyone needs to get together. I think that includes Ariane Henry, and that certainly includes the Montana Group in all its
that consensus
variations.
Considerably over time. So if we could now go to Mr. Dubourg, you have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to welcome our witnesses. We have both Sébastien with us, so welcome. Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, Son Excellence.
Mr. Ambassador, His Excellency, I'm very happy you are at our committee today. I must say I have several questions to put to you. So just like me, I would appreciate if you would be brief in your answers. My first question, given the current context in Haiti, political, security, humanitarian context, how is your staff in Haiti given this situation?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur Dubourg.
Thank you for your question. I would like to congratulate you for your statement at the House of Commons. 2 weeks ago, it was noticed and well appreciated in Haiti by everyone. Now, the embassy staff is doing well given the circumstances. Of course, there's been 8 weeks of crisis, so it's taxing. People are tired, but we are able to take breaks, short breaks, and relieve one another. It's even more difficult for our local staff. That is for sure. To see their country paralyzed in this way for close to 2 months. But we are well equipped in terms of fuel reserves. We have everything we need. But of course, everyone would like the crisis to be resolved as quickly as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now, why is Canada, as other countries, considered the best positioned to intervene in Haiti? That's a question that should go to politicians more than to the ambassador, but I'll try to answer as best I can. But we have a very positive relationship with this country because we've balanced interventions. Canada's solidarity with Haitians is well known over the years. We had many people who came to study here, but that's the general history of the country and the relations between the two countries. You know the Haitian history. Since colonial times, there was American occupation, and for various reasons, some countries have borne the burden. Thank you. Talking about intervention. Here in the diaspora, just like in Haiti, people are divided about when we talk about intervention. Canada's Prime Minister made a statement in which he stated that before sending any mission to Haiti, we need some elements, and he mentioned a level of support from the Haitian people. How would you describe that support? It's very difficult to measure because right now we don't have many tools, surveys and focus groups like we do in Canada. I don't like the word intervention to start and the word assistance. I prefer assistance, and I think that's what the Haitians prefer as well. I have been privileged to spend a lot of time in the country. Without even talking about security assistance, Canada is very active. I visited people in various regions. The ordinary Haitian was always happy to see people from the Canadian Embassy come and talk about projects, the needs on the ground, and the assistance we are offering this country. So we do have a good reputation. We are doing good work. It's not perfect. This is a large zone, so of course there are things we could have done better. But generally speaking, Canada is very well perceived. Canada's response has been measured because we're taking time to talk to people, to meet people before we take any decision. That's also part of the equation. You also, in your introductory remarks, talked about corruption. I would talk about systemic corruption between the gangs, economic elite, and politicians. Canada would like to impose sanctions, severe sanctions on those people. Do you believe that those sanctions could have a significant impact, particularly on the economic elite? Yes. Absolutely, yes. I think that was the missing ingredient. For weeks now, since we started talking about a possible assistance mission, we've talked about avoiding the mistakes of the past. You heard Melanie Joly and others talk about it. So we intervened massively in the past without addressing the structural issues of the economy and economic control by a small group of people, of actors who control a huge part of the economy and who sometimes do business in a way that is not necessarily clean. So we must immediately address that issue. If we apply the same solutions we've applied in the past, let's not expect a different result. Thank you. Very quickly, you know that here we have Elections Canada and Elections Quebec, which does not exist in Haiti. When do you think elections could be organized in Haiti? To have elections, you first of all need an agreement on the transition. But the Prime Minister needs more partners before he moves forward. The next step is the appointment of a provisional electoral commission composed of 9 people. It kind of mirrors the system we have here. So the appointment is made of people from different groups, unions, political parties, and so on. So the objective of the agreement is to agree on the composition of this group, and then you have electoral experts and so on. So we need to wait at least a year. Today is the 31st of October. That's it. Thank you. Maybe my last question. Do you think it's a good thing for countries, this intervention of the countries of the Caribbean in Haiti? Yes, I had lots of discussion, CARICOM. I had lots of discussions from people in CARICOM, and lots of efforts have been made. We can learn a lot from our partners in the region. We must listen to them and we must work with them. Mr. Ambassador, I know that you are Canada's ambassador to Haiti. You've been there for a year. In your opinion, when did this gang proliferation start? We've heard about 200 gangs. When you started your mission, were there so many gangs? Yes, I think so. I think there were that many. I think this started some 10 years ago. When we talk about violence in Haiti, it's something that started a long time ago. The use of violence in politics is not something new, but the current manifestation, well, I can't be specific. Maybe over the past 10 years, we saw the manifestation of these gangs, and it has become dramatic. During my last appearance, the south of the capital is blocked. So you can't leave. So the entire peninsula is blocked. So goods cannot circulate, aid cannot circulate. The exit towards the Dominican Republic is also blocked. We had the road towards the north, but over the past few months, it's a very difficult road. I will not say it's blocked because there's still some movement in that direction, but it's almost blocked. So the capital is somewhat surrounded. The only side that is not blocked is the sea. Mr. Ambassador, in your opinion, if there were an intervention in Haiti, do you think this could be done without blood being spilled in Haiti? I think that should be the absolute priority. We've seen enough violence, enough suffering here. So we need to do everything we can to make sure that any security assistance here should be done as peacefully as possible. But Mr. Ambassador, we are hearing that the gangs are heavily armed. Yes, the gangs are heavily armed. All sorts of weapons are getting into Haiti, particularly from the United States, and this is problematic. You have a lot of illegal trafficking of weapons, not only there, but not only here, but all of Central America. Several stakeholders, gang experts have said the same thing.
Pardon. La volonté.
The desire to fight with professional soldiers, that's another whole conversation.
Now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I want to thank our witnesses. Thank you for being with us. I think you are also aware of this. We are faced with a dilemma in the sense that no one wants an intervention from the international community led by Canada. At least we want to support the Haitian government to ensure the security of the territory and help them organize elections. On our side, we have some people from the Haitian diaspora who say we shouldn't do anything. Whenever people from the West set foot in the country, it was to aggravate the situation. So the ambassador made reference to this. The Haitians need to be involved to identify future solutions. The problem, and it's something that you mentioned properly, Your Excellency, is that we don't really know who the interlocutor is because the government is asking us to intervene. But how legitimate is that government? On the 7th of October, when you spoke, you said that Haiti had been minutes away from an agreement with Ariel and Freddie Jean. So what is the situation at this time? My understanding is that discussions have resumed between parties. You mentioned the Prime Minister and Mr. Freddie Jean. He is the president-elect from the Montana Group, designated by the Montana Group. There are other actors as well in the equation. The good news in Haiti is that there are always tables, big ones, small ones. People talk to each other. The bad news is that there's been no outcome. The example you've mentioned, the 3rd of October, is the most recent. We continue promoting dialogue. The evaluation mission that was with us here last week joined us to meet the main actors. The message was the same for everyone on the importance of reaching an understanding. I'll come back to an expression: no more politics as usual. We cannot continue doing business as usual. You've talked about the evaluation mission. I understand that it's over as we speak. Who were those involved? Do you have an idea of what the findings of that assessment were? They came back on Saturday. So they are now in Ottawa giving their briefings, and they also have to prepare a report. This week, there were 2 people from Foreign Affairs, the Director of the Stabilization Program, the Director of Humanitarian Affairs, and a representative from National Defense. and a representative of another chamber and a mission head led by Mr. Michael Jean and a representative from the Prime Minister who held two positions. On the 27th of October at L'Heure du Monde, the former Canadian ambassador, Mr. Gilles Rivard, indicated that we had to start with sanctions of some private sector actors and some corrupt politicians who usually go abroad, including going to Canada, and they continue prospering their investments. Do you agree with this assertion in response to a question that was put by Emmanuel Dubourg on the 21st of October, a few days before the UN Security Council had adopted a resolution providing for sanctions in Haiti? This resolution provides for travel bans and embargo on weapons against the designated people who engage in criminal activities in Haiti, including weapons trafficking, attacks against UN staff, kidnappings, stopping the flow of humanitarian aid, and violations of human rights, including sexual and sexist violence. We want to impose sanctions, but right now nothing is happening. Can we hope that Canada will soon impose sanctions, considering that we agree that there should be sanctions? Yes. Work is ongoing intensely, so we hope that something will happen soon. So I understand there will be news coming. Stay tuned. The United States is preparing another resolution. According to the U.S. rep in the Security Council, that resolution will allow for an international humanitarian mission to improve the climate of security and facilitate the flow of humanitarian assistance that the population really needs. Though the mission proposed will not be under the UN, the U.S. would like it to be under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter. Do you know what the situation is with this resolution that the United States and Mexico are working on? I know that intense discussions are going on in New York. It started last week and is going on this week. Ambassador there is also involved, along with others. They were trying to invent something new, something under Chapter 7, but that is not led by the United Nations. As far as I know, it's never been done, so they need to explain the concept better. We don't know how permanent members will position themselves. But I do know that discussions are ongoing in New York. In your opinion, why do you think that they want a mission that will not be under the UN but will be under Chapter 7 of the Charter?
In 15 seconds, please, in your response.
There have been lots of missions in the past, and there's been lots of bad publicity about past missions. So maybe it's a reputation problem that they're trying to avoid.
We now go to Ms. McPherson. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the ambassador for coming and sharing this information with us. And I want to express how my sympathies with him, with his staff, with all Haitians as they go through this very, very difficult time. I know for the many Haitian Canadians that I've spoken to, this is a incredibly painful time. Obviously, Haiti is facing a horrendous humanitarian crisis, a political crisis, an economic crisis. Humanitarians I've spoken to have told me that this is the worst that they have ever seen in Haiti. So, of course, obviously, Haitian Canadians are very worried about their friends and their family, and quite frankly, some are opposed to Canada's position. Mr. Ambassador, I'm sure you're aware of the many criticisms of the core group. Many Haitians don't trust the intentions of the group and have accused the core group of interference in Haiti's domestic affairs. I'm sure you've read Evan Dyer's piece last year on the resignation of Daniel Foote, who called it international puppeteering, said that it was hubris for us to pick leadership in Haiti. And Ambassador, the Global Affairs website says that the core group has a mandate to serve as the voice of the international community to the state of Haiti. Could you give me some sense of how who gave the core this mandate?
Well, maybe we need to update the website. First, I want to thank you for your kind words, and I just want to say that the Haitian people are extraordinary. They get up every morning and face, challenges that we can't even imagine as Canadians, and I don't deserve to breathe the same air they do. And it's an honor to serve both Canada and the Haitian people. On the diaspora, I hear them. I have relatives and friends. I grew up in the suburbs of Montreal with a Haitian uncle and a Haitian stepdad there for a while. So I hear it, and I sometimes feel it too, although I'm not allowed to say that as an ambassador. But I know it's a very delicate issue for very right historical reasons. Now, the core group, I get this question a lot, and I'm going to try the short version. I don't want to eat all your time, but I did a panel with some diaspora members this summer, and we talked about it for half an hour or something. It started under previous UN missions, where the SRSG, there were Chapter 7 missions, right? So Chapter 7 mission, the state sort of gives a bit of its sovereignty to the United Nations, and the special representative of the Secretary General kind of becomes a sort of a président bis, right? Sort of there's a lot of power that comes with a Chapter 7 resolution. So the core group was created to sort of diffuse that power and sort of help manage it, and it was formed of basically countries that contributed troops to the missions. So the membership sort of evolved as the troop contributing nations changed over the various missions. Now the last troops left, and MINUSTAH became MINUJUST, and then it became BINU. BINU does not have peacekeeping troops. It does have a strong police contingent, but no peacekeeping. And the core group stayed behind. I always say that there's a core group in every capital. It's perfectly normal for like-minded ambassadors and to get together and share views and exchange and say stuff. What is maybe not less normal is the importance we give it here, and frankly, I think it's a bit exaggerated. I mean, does the core group meet? Yes, it does. Sometimes we invite others. There's not that many diplomats left here on the ground in Port-au-Prince, so we have to coordinate. We share information, we exchange, contacts and knowledge, and that's perfectly normal and healthy. You need to do that as a diplomatic community. What we don't do is come out and express public opinions about everything that's going on in the country. There have been 2 core group communiques in the last. As far as I can, let's go back to when the president was assassinated. There was one about Ariane Henry, and then there was one about the fuel crisis we had in November 2021, and that's it. The rest of the time, we just compare notes and we mind our own business.
Well, and that is, I think, one of the big concerns, of course, is that when the Canadian government website says that they have a mandate to serve as the voice, that's problematic. And when we see a country desperately trying to push for their own sovereignty, I think that it's important that we recognize that. I think
you're right, and I thank you for flagging it, because I was not aware of this, and see Sebastien nodding. I think we're going to have a look at that.
Thanks. One other question I have for you, I guess, is, we've talked, some of my colleagues have brought up the Montana Accord. We've talked about the Montana Accord. Does Canada support the Montana Accord? I know you've said that it is complicated, and then you've mentioned that you think that their voice or influence is not as strong in Haiti as it is outside of Haiti. But does the Canadian government support the asks within the Montana Accord?
Let me just clarify, because I actually have friends on that accord, and I want to, lose friends. But I mean, loud. I should have said loud, right? Their voices maybe not as loud. I mean, to me, it's not about supporting an accord or a party or someone else. Frankly, at this point, to me, it's about supporting Haitian inclusive solution. They bring a very important part of that solution to the table. I talk to them all the time, all of them, because it's pretty fluid, the Haitian political scene, and I think they're absolutely important. But they're not the only actors. I think we have to, I think the current government has to be part of the solution. There's multiple political parties here, some of them very important with large bases. They have to be part of the solution too. It has to be. We talked a lot about the transition, right? There's going to be a campaign at some point. So maybe people who are not interested in, kind of like when you guys have a leadership race, maybe whoever gets to lead the transition shouldn't be running for leader. Maybe that's a good model. Ariel Henry says he doesn't want to run for president. If others don't want to run for president, why don't they all get together and organize the transition? There are folks who do want to run for president. They're not being shy about it. They're campaigning already. And they've said, I'm staying out of the transition because I want to be president.
I want to run. Well, I have one last question for you. This is a humanitarian crisis. You've talked about how horrific it is on the ground.
Ms. McPherson, we're well over 6 minutes. Thank you. So we now go to Mr. Epp. Mr. Epp, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I go on, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for your time. I cannot imagine the stress you're under. Picking up where we left off earlier, if there is a consensus coming from the assessment team, coming from discussions with our international community, that Canada should intervene with military aid, are both options on the table? Both peacekeeping forces and interventionist forces? We've long supported, as I understand, the National Police, Haitian National Police. Where will Canada go? What would be your recommendation?
So, this was obviously a big topic with the assessment team last week, right? Again, learn the lessons of the past. I think what's really important is that whoever comes in and they can't be substituting themselves for the Haitian National Police. You're right. We have heavily invested in the Haitian National Police. There's a very strong core, around which we can continue to build. So you would have to, I would see it as us coming in behind the HNP and strengthening them even more. And I think if you do that, then you avoid the mistake of the past where you sort of come in and you do everything for them and you try to bring them along, but obviously it didn't work because when MINUSTA left, what happened. So I think that's the key. In any scenario, we have to build it around supporting the HNP. The sustainable solution to Haiti's security problem is the Haitian National Police.
Thank you. I want to echo the comments of my colleague across the way, Mr. MP Dubourg, that none of us want to see blood spilled. But to that, then may I ask, what was Secretary Blinken's ask of Canada relative to your immediate comment?
So I was not in that meeting. I can't tell you exactly what he asked for. I did read the Miami Herald the day before the visit, where it was fairly obvious that the State Department is looking for Canada to take leadership of this force. But I don't think they've defined it, and exactly what shape or form it would take. They're quite aware that at the same time as the Secretary was in Ottawa, the assessment team was here looking at options. I should take it as a compliment that they want us to lead, but I think we have to do things our way, Canadian way, and look at Canada's interests in doing this, and do it with regional partners. It's very important we talk to the right people before we make any decisions.
Okay, I want to take my remaining time. Sorry, Mr. Ambassador. I want to take my remaining time and just shift a bit over to aid to Haiti. I think we're $1.87 billion that we, as a country, have donated. Can I ask, is Canada right now supplying some aid bilaterally, or is most of it, or hopefully all of it, almost flowing through our organizations here in Canada and to their partners on the ground? Can you give me a rough split on what's being done bilaterally and what's being done through partner organizations?
Sébastien, est-ce que tu veux répondre?
Sébastien, would you like to answer that? Do you have the figures with you?
For your question. It's indeed the Canadian assistance is a mix both of multilateral funding, for example, response to humanitarian needs, but also working with bilateral partners in a number of fields, whether it's gender equality, health, education. The Prime Minister recently also announced a Canadian contribution of $20 million for reconstruction in Haiti, made that announcement a few weeks ago. And Canada is also strongly supporting strengthening the security system in Haiti. So with regards to numbers per se, from a bilateral programming perspective, and it's a mix of Canadian and international partners and multilateral partners, our funding just last year was about $50 million. And then the other half, just for last year, because we had about $98 to $100 million last year, the other half was a mix of humanitarian as well and other partners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Up, we now go to Ms. Vandenbelt. You have 4 minutes, Ms. Vandenbelt.
Thank you very much, and I will be splitting my time with Mr. Zuberi, so I'll be quick. First of all, Ambassador, thank you so much for being here to talk about Haiti. This is a crisis that I believe is not getting the kind of attention that it should be getting, and hearing the stories from diaspora communities, but also from our development partners on the ground, it is absolutely heart-wrenching to hear what is happening on the ground. So my question to you, we've talked a lot about what to do in the immediate crisis right now, the lack of rule of law, amongst other things. But obviously there are deep underlying issues here. And I wonder, Ambassador, if you can talk about the long term and how we address those issues, the issues of governance and corruption, a lot of the things that have led to the current crisis that, to be honest, when speaking with development partners, many of them actually say that in some ways the prioritization, particularly they call it projectization of development, where the priorities are being set by development international partners who have projects that then people will respond to, as opposed to the actual prioritization and needs of people in Haiti on the ground. And I wonder if you could give us some recommendations about how we can make sure we're really responding to the core issues on the ground.
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're really good at diagnostics, right? And when I say we, it's everybody who works on Haiti, and we spend so much time figuring out what's wrong. I think we know what's wrong and how we got here. I think we know that if Haiti is going to have success long term, you need to restructure, reform the economy. You need people to pay their taxes and their customs fees. You need a judicial system to enforce that. The judicial system has pretty much collapsed. In order to be able to do that, you need to fight what is Haiti's biggest number one problem since the dictatorship, and that is impunity. Everything stems from impunity, corruption, impunity. So we've tried throughout the course of the last 30 years, every time there's an assistance mission, we've tried to fight impunity from the inside with some success. The country has been sort of going up and down. We're in a pretty big low right now, but there were some things that really worked. What we didn't do is fight it from the outside in. And that's where the sanctions piece comes in. And I think sanctions sounds like it's short term because it's new, but it's not. To me, it's fundamental. It's long term, because what you do is you stop the flow of all this illicit capital out of the country. You change the behavior of the economic elite, and you change the way the country, sort of works at a macroeconomic level. And then you can start doing the other stuff and actually have a lasting impact. So that's why it's very important, and we can actually do it. Because we're Canada, because we're the U.S. The links with the North American economy for Haiti's economy are obvious. So that to me is the long-term part. I think your question also deserves a longer answer, frankly, a whole seminar on how we plan better as an international community when stability comes back, how we approach better our assistance, how we coordinate ourselves better. And I think I would hope we bring in new donors. I have to say, the first time I worked on Haiti was right after the earthquake in 2010. And there are several countries that were very active at the time that have left, that are no longer active. Some have just closed down and are gone. And that's a shame. And we have to show these donors, these countries, that it's worth coming back.
Thank you. Samir?
Je pense qu'on a...
Mr. Zuberi. Thank you. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Bergeron.
Oui, merci.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellency, if you would allow me, I would like to come back to this draft resolution that is being prepared between the United States and Mexico. The Haitian ambassador in Washington asked the international community to speed up talks, whereas efforts to ratify UN resolution seem to be dead. He says that the United States and Canada need to talk quickly on the ways of taking the country out of the impasse. Though we seem to be aware of what is happening when it comes to the negotiations between the U.S. and others, is Canada willing to take part in such a mission? There's no issue that Canada is interested in contributing to finding solutions. We've been participating on that issue for more than 1 year. We had people in New York. We went to the Dominican Republic. So work is ongoing. But let me come back to the sanctions. The impact, once the UN resolution was adopted some 10 days ago, there was an immediate effect. No more violent demonstrations, no blockades. The Varu terminal was still blocked. The exits from the city were still blocked, but in the metropolitan area, there was an immediate impact. That is important. So I think it creates a space for more discussions, serious discussions. So we need time. We need time to consult the right people to avoid the errors we made in the past. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I also want to thank the staff at the embassy. You can count on our collaboration for the rest so that we can truly help. And I hope this time it's going to be sustainable so that we can help the Haitian people rise above this new crisis. So we need to help this country gain some degree of stability.
You're considerably over time.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Ms. McPherson, you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to the Ambassador for being here with us today. Ambassador, can you tell me, I would like some more information about the humanitarian efforts being undertaken. What steps is Canada taking to ensure that humanitarian organizations that are working in Haiti to deliver services in a neutral, impartial way aren't going to be drawn into a military or security operation, and that they can continue to work to deliver services to people on the basis of need, not based on political priorities or security interests?
Absolutely. I think it's an important question. It's very much top of mind for all times for us, but particularly these days with the intensity of the security crisis this last couple of weeks. They have good access here. They've been able to maintain that access. And there's a strong, sort of fellowship of the agencies. And if there are ever issues, the government will always cooperate. So I think what's important, we're trying to focus on cholera right now because we want to sort of nip this thing in the bud before it happens. I think there's a flash appeal that's being prepared, as I write, by I think it's OCHA or somebody in Geneva. So we're tracking that very closely, regular meetings between my humanitarian officials and the various UN agencies to make sure we're tracking everything and we're addressing problems if and as they arise.
Thank you. I think the humanitarian community will be happy to hear that. They've certainly been reaching out to us about concerns around that. My last question for you, I guess, very quickly. Yesterday Brazil chose new leadership, so we have President-elect Lula elected. Do you think, considering his involvement or considering Brazil's involvement in the past, do you feel that may change the direction of the international community takes? Do you feel that will have any impact? What would be your assessment of that?
So, I mean, it's early days, but clearly Brazil had sort of stepped back a bit from their leadership on Haiti. They're still here. The ambassador is a wonderful man. He's a friend, and they play a positive role. But perhaps with a new government, the position of the Brazilian government will change. I guess we'll have to see. Time will tell.
Okay. Well, and I guess I'll finish just by saying that I do appreciate your testimony today. It's been very informative, and I know that all of us have said that here in this room, but that the government of Canada really does need to listen to Haitians and let Haitians have the ability to take their country forward into the democracy and the thriving economy that I think that they deserve and thrive in a community that is safe and that does not have the suffering that we're seeing in Haiti right now. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Let the record show that I was nodding. No.
Well, on that point, Ambassador Carrière, Mr. Seguin, allow me to thank you on behalf of the entire committee. We're very grateful that you made yourselves available. You are certainly serving under very difficult circumstances, so we certainly hope you all the best, you and your staff. Keep well and keep safe. Thank you very much for being with us.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you.
So just before adjourning, a couple of really minor issues, if I may, from the members. Last week, in our haste to get out of here, we overlooked a couple of details with respect to the Human Rights Subcommittee report that we are adopting. Just wanted to make sure that there's unanimous consent that the report be entitled "The Situation of Human Rights Defenders, Journalists, and Media Organizations." I don't think there's any disagreement there. That the chair, clerk, and analyst be authorized to make sure grammatical and editorial changes as may be necessary without changing the substance of the report. Full agreement there. Thank you. That pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. Unanimous consent to that. We're almost there. That dissenting or supplementary opinions be in Calibri, 12-point font, left aligned, single-spaced, and be submitted electronically in both official languages to the clerk of the committee not later than 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, November 4th.
Did you say calligraphy?
No, I said Calibri. I said Calibri. Calibri,
I would prefer calligraphy.
So there's consent. And finally, that the chair present the report to the House. Okay. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.